In today's episode of Today in World War II, Generalissimo Franco not only is not dead, but he makes a determination that has a major effect on the war. The British launch Operation Compass in Egypt to get rid of those pesky Italians, and the Soviet Union breaks through finally on the Moscow front and causes some major damage to the Nazis. And finally, uh, United States president and Congress, I should say, declares war against Japan after yesterday's brutal attack on Pearl Harbor. Let's get started. All right, so I don't know if you, a lot of you remember this because I'm old. I remember this as a child, but Saturday Night Live on its first season, I think it was in 75, there 74, 75, they had a running gag with Chevy Chase on Weekend Update that he would every update he would say, in today's news, Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead. Well, on December 8th, 1940, Generalissimo Francisco Franco made a decision about his country's participation or non-participation in World War II, which was a major factor in helping the Allies win, believe this or not. Now, I'm not going to say that it was up there, on the level of breaking the German Enigma codes or the Soviets stopping the Germans on the Eastern Front, North Africa and so on and so forth, Normandy invasion. But in 1940, it was a big deal. Why is that? Because if you look at geography, you can see that the British had a very important naval base at Gibraltar. Gibraltar is the rock. It is a British, the British took it over in one of the wars with Spain back in the 1700s. They had controlled it ever since. It was very vulnerable because Spain was right there. And, if Spain had decided to mass its troops and go in to take over Gibraltar, that could have had major implications because obviously if the Spanish fascists had joined Hitler in the war, then they could have choked the Mediterranean Sea because they would have put tanks and troops and the Luftwaffe there and so forth. So it could have done major damage to the British attempts to hold Malta and Egypt in the Suez Canal. So Franco made the wise decision on his part for his country to not enter the war on the side of the Axis powers, Italy and Spain, not Spain, I'm sorry, Germany, because they had just finished a brutal civil war, and they weren't ready anyway. So it was a self-serving decision, but it was very important for the British to not have the Spaniards come in and take Gibraltar. Now the Brits still had to guard against that, so they had to keep a pretty heavy garrison there. But luckily there was never any attack from the side of Spain, and Franco also did not let the Germans use Spain as a corridor to attack Gibraltar on their own, which was also a pretty important decision in the favor of the British. However, Franco did allow Spanish troops to fight with the Nazis um, in the Soviet Union when the Germans attacked the Soviet Union in 41. And let's just put it this way, not a lot of those muchachos came back from that war. Okay. So what I would love for you to do is to go ahead and click on the subscribe button. So that way become a subscriber, and that way you get notified. Also, click the little bell that will give you real-time notification when I drop one of my videos, which is I say every single day because I post every single day. So make sure that you don't miss out on that, okay? Now, on December 8th, 1941, the Soviet major counteroffensive outside of Moscow finally started hurting the Germans. They broke through near Moscow, and they cut the Kalinin Road, and that forced the German units to start making hasty withdrawals because they were going to get encircled, and they had to leave a bunch of equipment in the process. This was the start. The Germans missed the boat. They had even with all their blunders, they still might have taken Moscow, but once the weather turned and once those cracked Siberian divisions came and were reinforced and they were kept in reserve for this counter reserve, excuse me, this counter offensive, it was all over at that. But the shouting, of course, it's easy to say, well, in December 8th, 1941, the war was over. No, I mean, the Soviets had this, inconvenient little problem of having to get rid of the entire German army out of their borders. And that took a few years to do to accomplish. But as far as the threat to lose the war, when the Germans were stopped and this counteroffensive drove them back, at least to give Moscow breathing space, and it was over. There was no way. But of course, Hitler did his best to help Stalin the rest of the war. Because he issued his famous Führer Directive 39, which called for German troops to never retreat, to hold their ground, to fight to the last man. And, this is what happens when you have a corporal in World War I takes over the strategic planning, military planning in a major, major, winner take all loser is on his knees for decades. You don't want a corporal running that, but that's what happened because he would not listen to his generals who said we need to withdraw. We need to shorten our lines because he just couldn't bear the thought of doing this. Now later we'll get into this in later videos, but he did acquiesce on that, but it was always too late. It was always too late. Okay. And then finally, on December 8th, 1941, the United States Congress declared war against Japan for their attack on Pearl Harbor. And if you remember, a very famous speech that FDR had said that night on December 7th in the United States, where he said that December 7th is a date which will live in infamy. And in one fell swoop, this Japanese attack was such a horrendous blunder on their part because the United States population was very anti-war. There was huge percentages of the population that believed in America first. There was open German fascist sympathies in a lot of people. And in one fell swoop, by attacking us without declaring war first, by a surprise attack, which we believe was a stab in the back, well, that united the country, and the United States would fight on both fronts, united and with no more bickering about whether we should be in the war or not. It was, you come for us, you better take us down because we're going to destroy you, which is what we did, especially against the Japanese because we had help with the Soviets, of course, and the Brits in the European theater. We pretty much we did everything in the Pacific side. I just thought it was interesting that look at what's happening today in our society. A lot of America First out there. There's a whole party that's now being taken over by an American First philosophy that we abandon our allies, we don't support them, and we don't support democracy, and we do deals and give favoritism to authoritarian regimes. Thank goodness that we did not have that kind of president in the White House in 1941. So I will bid you adieu and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in today, and let's keep this content rolling.